What's up guys, so today we're going to take a look at the 2018 iPad Pro 3rd generation, and we're going to compare it to the original 2015-16 iPad Pro. So let's go ahead and take a look at these two devices. So first off, I just want to say that this is a 9.7 inch and this is a 12.9 inch, but we're not going to compare the size because you can get this generation in 12.9. And this one is available in 11 inches, which is really similar to this without like the extra bezels. So first thing, I just want to go off the design. The older model has the Touch ID at the bottom, and it has a single camera at the top with kind of thick borders on the top and bottom, but the side-to-side borders aren't that bad. On this side, we have the magnetic connector for keyboard. It's actually the smart connector. On top, we have two speakers, a headphone jack, and the power button. And on this side, we have the volume rocker. Now, on the back, we just have a single camera with the dual tone flash. And at the bottom, we have two more speakers and a lightning port. On the new model, we have two speakers at the bottom with USB Type-C, which is really nice. On the top, we have two more speakers. There's no headphone jack. They removed the headphone jack on this model. On this side, we have the magnetic connector, volume rockers, and this side has nothing. On the back, the smart connector's on the bottom now. We have a bigger camera with a true tone flash as well. So first things first, this one has the Touch ID, so you just put your fingerprint, which is really nice. This one uses the unique Face ID system, so it's pretty quick, and the best part about it is it works in horizontal mode too, so that's really nice. So in terms of display, the smaller iPad Pro has a 9.7 inch IPS LCD, and the resolution on this is 1536 by 2048, 264 ppi. And it has a true tone display and 120 Hz touch sensing, so it's very smooth. In terms of the newer iPads, they have again an IPS LCD display. They have true tone, but these have wide color gamut, and this resolution on this model is 2048 by 2732, giving it 265 pixels per inch. And it also has 120 Hz display. Instead of just a touch sensing, this one's full 120 Hz. In terms of CPU, this has a dual-core A9X CPU, and this has a 8-core A12X CPU. So the CPU difference between these are really big. So if you're still running this, you might notice it kind of runs slower in some sense, where this one's really fast. In terms of RAM, this has 4 GB of RAM, with the 1 TB model having 6 GB. This one has 2 GB of RAM, but the 12.9 inch model has 4 GB of RAM. So if you have the bigger version, you're probably set for much longer than this one, thanks to twice the amount of RAM. And in terms of the cameras, this has a 12 megapixel camera. So it's single camera. It's not bad. Has HDR support. It can do 4K 30 FPS video. And this one has also a 12 megapixel camera, and it does only have a single camera as well. The camera on this one can do 4K at 60 FPS, so that's one thing to know. In terms of the front facing cameras, we have a 5 megapixel and a 7 megapixel. Both do 1080p at 30 FPS. And in terms of Wi-Fi, they both have 802.11 AC. This one has Bluetooth 5.0. Whereas the older model has Bluetooth 4.2, and both have assisted GPS, whereas the cellular versions also have slightly better GPS. This uses USB 3.1 and this uses USB 2.0. So in terms of battery, the 12.9 has a 9720 mAh battery on the new generation, and the old generation 12.9 has a 10,307 mAh battery. The newer 11 inch has a 7812 mAh battery, whereas the older model, this one, has a 7306. but they're all rated for 10 hours of multimedia usage, so battery life should be very similar. In terms of sound, let's see which one's louder. So in terms of loudness, the newer one is slightly louder, slightly, but the newer one has much better bass than the older one. Even though this one has pretty good bass, I would be interested to see how the 12.9 versus 12.9 actually stack up, since that one is a bigger tablet. Next, I want to go into how fast they are, so things like launching apps. So for instance, let's launch Safari on both devices. They're pretty quick. Let's see, how about calendar? Once I find it on here. So, 1, 2, 3. So, they're pretty fast. Settings, let's see, how about clock? So, the iPad is a little bit faster, but this one's not far behind. Now, when you actually start using more and more apps, this one will start reaching a limit because of the 2 gigabytes of RAM. So if we open something a bit more memory intensive, so for instance, if I open my notes program, which should really tax this one, so let's open them. As you can see, this one loaded. This one loaded after. So we can just, open something. Let's see. So this one's a bit faster. But after some time, we will have memory swapping. So let's go back to the YouTube video and see if both have retained the memory. So this one have retained it. So the good thing about iOS is, even though this has 2 gigabytes of RAM, the memory management is really good when you compare it to something like Android. Now, neither of these have wireless charging. They both use their own respective charging. I have found this one to charge faster, probably because it has an 18-watt charger, where this one has, I think, 12 watts. In terms of iOS, both of these devices are running the latest iPadOS 13 beta. So the good news is, this device is still supported, so when iOS 13 comes out, it will run it. And as you can see, it's running it pretty well. I mean, so far, everything that I've done is working. There's no memory swapping at all. So far, everything's in memory. So it runs pretty good. It's not a slacker still, Whether or not this will get the new iOS in 14 next year, we don't know. But this one will surely get it. But if you have the 12.9 version of this, getting this one, I don't know if it's really necessary. Unless you're doing some really intensive programs, as a normal tablet, this one works really well. In terms of brightness, let's see which one gets brighter. So, right away, this one is much brighter than this display. I mean, it's also bigger, but this does have a higher rating as well. I think the one reason people would want to switch to the newer generation is the Apple Pencil. So on this model, the Apple Pencil is magnetic and just connects like that and charges it, which is really convenient, and it'll be much harder to lose the pencil. This is something that took Apple a very long time, and I gotta say that I really like this pencil better than the other pencil. In terms of the pencil, the way to charge it is, on the older iPad, you have to plug it into the bottom to charge it. And you can see the status, not there. You can see the status here that it says Apple Pencil. Okay, now let's test the latency. One thing I will say is the current iPad, which only costs $309, gives you pretty much everything this iPad Pro does from a perspective of price. This iPad is actually a pretty good deal. In terms of latency, features, and everything, this iPad is actually slightly better than the older iPad Pro. So if you're looking for a new iPad, whether it's the iPad Pro or regular one, this model is actually not bad, and it supports the Apple Pencil.